There's a particular kind of pain that cuts deeper than any physical wound. It's the pain of being ignored by someone who once meant everything to you. The silence where there used to be laughter, the empty space where their presence once filled your world with meaning. You reach out and your words disappear into the void. You call and the phone rings endlessly, each tone echoing your growing desperation. You send messages that remain unread, unopened, as if you never existed at all. And in that darkness, two voices begin to war within you. One screams to block them, to cut them off completely, to make them feel the same rejection they've inflicted upon you. The other whispers desperately to try harder, to beg, to plead, to chase them, until they finally turn around and see you again. But what if I told you there's a third way? A path that the ancient Stoics discovered over 2,000 years ago, a way that transforms your deepest pain into your greatest strength. A way that doesn't require you to block anyone or beg for anything. A way that makes you so magnetic, so powerful, so utterly unshakable that the very person who ignored you will eventually wonder what happened to the person they used to know. The Stoics understood something profound about human nature and the dynamics of power. They knew that the moment you chase, you lose. The moment you beg, you diminish. The moment you react emotionally to someone's absence, you give them the very power they're already using against you. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the ancient world, wrote in his private journal that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. Think about that for a moment. The person ignoring you isn't actually doing anything to you right now. They're simply absent. But your mind, your emotions, your entire being is creating a storm of suffering around that absence. You're torturing yourself with scenarios of what they might be doing, who they might be with, why they don't care enough to respond. You're giving someone who isn't even present the power to control your entire emotional state. The Stoics called this the fundamental error of the untrained mind, allowing external circumstances to dictate internal peace. But here's what happens when you choose the Stoic path. Instead of blocking them in anger or chasing them in desperation, you do something far more powerful. You withdraw your emotional investment. Not out of spite, not out of hurt, but out of wisdom. You recognize that their silence is information, not punishment. It's telling you exactly where you stand in their priorities. More importantly, it's showing you where they should stand in yours. Seneca taught that every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. Their withdrawal from your life isn't a loss, it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to reclaim the energy you've been pouring into someone who doesn't value it. An opportunity to redirect that passion, that love, that intense focus back toward yourself and your own growth. When you stop chasing, you stop losing. When you stop reacting, you start responding. When you start responding instead of reacting, you begin to access a power that most people never discover. The ancient Stoics practiced something they called the discipline of desire. This wasn't about becoming cold or emotionless. It was about learning to want what happens rather than demanding that what you want must happen. Applied to relationships, this means accepting that someone's absence from your life is exactly what should be happening right now. Not because you deserve it, not because it's fair, but because it's reality. And reality, the Stoics taught, is the only place where true power can be found. When you stop fighting reality, you stop exhausting yourself. When you stop exhausting yourself, you begin to conserve the energy that you can use to become someone extraordinary. The person who ignored you will eventually notice that you're no longer trying to get their attention. They'll notice that you've stopped calling, stopped texting, stopped showing up in their peripheral vision like a ghost of their past. And here's the beautiful irony. The moment you stop needing their attention, it's often the moment they begin to wonder why you no longer seem to need anything from them. True strength isn't found in grand gestures or dramatic declarations. It's found in the quiet dignity of walking away when you're not valued. Epictetus, who was born into slavery and understood powerlessness in ways most of us never will, taught that no one can hurt you without your permission. The person ignoring you cannot actually diminish your worth unless you allow them to. Cannot control your happiness unless you hand them the controls. They cannot make you feel less than unless you agree to feel less than. When you truly understand this, something magical happens. You begin to carry yourself differently. A calmness in your step because you're no longer running toward anyone or running away from anyone. There's a peace in your voice because you're no longer trying to convince anyone of your value. There's a light in your eyes because you're no longer dimming yourself to make others comfortable. This transformation doesn't happen overnight, but it happens inevitably when you commit to the Stoic path of self-mastery. The Stoics taught that the highest form of revenge is massive personal success. But this isn't about revenge in the petty sense. It's about becoming so focused on your own growth, your own goals, your own evolution, that the opinions and actions of others become irrelevant background noise. When someone ignores you, they're actually giving you the greatest gift possible. They're showing you exactly how much mental and emotional energy you've been wasting on someone who doesn't reciprocate your investment. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the best revenge is not to be like your enemy. The person who ignores you is acting from a place of ego, manipulation, or emotional immaturity. Your response should come from a place of wisdom, self-respect, and inner strength. You don't ignore them back to hurt them. You redirect your attention away from them because they've shown you that your attention is more valuable than their response. This isn't game playing. It's a self-preservation at the highest level. Here's what the ancient philosophers understood about human psychology that modern people often miss. The moment you stop being available to someone, it's the moment they begin to question your value. Not because you're trying to manipulate them, but because scarcity creates curiosity. When you were always there, always responding, always available, you became part of their baseline reality. They took your presence for granted the same way they take air for granted. But when you withdraw that presence, when you stop being predictable, when you stop being easily accessible, you suddenly become noticeable again. The Stoics called this the natural consequence of proper self-respect. When you value yourself appropriately, others begin to sense that value. When you treat your time, energy, and attention as precious resources, others begin to recognize their preciousness. This isn't about playing hard to get. This is about actually becoming someone who is genuinely hard to get. It's because you have so much going on in your life that you can't afford to waste time on people who don't prioritize you. The discipline of action that the Stoics taught is perhaps the most powerful tool in this transformation. Instead of taking action to get someone's attention, you take action to improve your own life. Instead of doing things hoping they'll notice, you do things because they align with your values and goals. Every workout you complete, every book you read, every skill you develop, every relationship you nurture with people who actually value you becomes a building block in the construction of a new version of yourself. This new version doesn't need validation from anyone because it's built on a foundation of self-respect and personal achievement. The person who ignored you knew the old version of you. The version that would chase, that would beg, that would lower itself to gain their attention. But they've never met this new version. This version that walks away with dignity. This version that doesn't argue or explain or justify. This version that simply redirects its energy toward people and activities that actually matter. Seneca taught that every man is in bondage to fear who depends upon the whims of fortune. The person who ignores you is your whim of fortune. As long as your emotional state depends on their response or lack thereof, you are in bondage. But the moment you accept that their behavior is about them, not about you, you begin to break free from that bondage. Their silence doesn't mean you're unlovable. Their absence doesn't mean you're unworthy. Their choice to ignore you doesn't diminish your value as a human being. It simply means that you weren't compatible, that your energies weren't aligned, that your paths were meant to diverge. The Stoics taught that obstacles are the way forward, not roadblocks to happiness. This person's rejection or neglect isn't stopping you from living a fulfilling life. It's actually clearing the path for you to find people who will value what you have to offer. It's creating space in your life for experiences and relationships that will actually enhance your well-being rather than drain it. The power of doing. Nothing is perhaps the most misunderstood concept in human relationships. When someone ignores you, your instinct is to do something, anything, to change the situation. But the Stoics understood that sometimes the most powerful action is no action at all. When you don't react to someone's silence with desperation or anger, you maintain your dignity. When you don't chase someone who's walking away, you preserve your self-respect. When you don't beg for attention from someone who's withholding it, you demonstrate that your worth isn't dependent on their recognition. This isn't passivity. This is strategic strength. You're not doing nothing because you don't care. You're doing nothing because you understand that your peace of mind is more valuable than their temporary validation. You're doing nothing because you recognize that chasing someone who doesn't want to be caught is a waste of the limited time and energy you have in this life. Marcus Aurelius wrote that you have power over your mind. It's not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. The person ignoring you is an outside event. Your reaction to their behavior is within your control. Your thoughts about what their silence means are within your control. Your decision about how to spend your time and energy moving forward is within your control. When you focus on what you can control rather than what you can't, you begin to reclaim your power. You can't control whether they respond to your messages, but you can control whether you keep sending them. You can't control whether they value your presence, but you can control whether you continue to offer it to someone who doesn't appreciate it. You can't control their feelings toward you, but you can control your feelings toward yourself. This shift in focus from external validation to internal strength is the cornerstone of Stoic philosophy and the key to transforming any rejection into personal growth. The Stoics believe that virtue is the only true good, and that living virtuously means acting with wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance, regardless of how others treat you. When someone ignores you, you have an opportunity to demonstrate all four of these virtues. Wisdom means recognizing that their behavior is information about them, not about you. Justice means treating yourself fairly by not accepting less than you deserve. Courage means walking away even when it's difficult, even when part of you wants to keep trying. Temperance means maintaining your emotional equilibrium rather than swinging between anger and desperation. When you respond to someone's neglect with virtue rather than reaction, you elevate yourself above the situation. You become someone who cannot be diminished by another person's choices because your strength comes from within, not from external validation. This is the kind of person who naturally attracts respect and admiration because they respect and admire themselves. Here's the profound truth that the Stoics discovered. The person who can walk away from anything that doesn't serve their highest good is the person who will eventually attract everything that does. When you stop chasing people who don't value you, you create space for people who do. When you stop begging for attention from those who withhold it, you become magnetic to those who naturally want to give it. When you stop lowering your standards to accommodate someone else's inability to meet them, you raise your entire life to a new level. The person who ignored you will eventually notice this transformation. They'll see that you've moved on, that you've grown, that you've become someone who no longer needs their validation. And here's the beautiful irony. By the time they realize what they've lost, you'll have gained so much more. You'll have gained self-respect, inner peace, emotional stability, and the kind of confidence that comes from knowing you can survive and thrive regardless of who stays or goes in your life. The final lesson from the Stoics is perhaps the most powerful. The person who tries to control you through neglect or manipulation only has power over you if you allow them to. The moment you stop participating in their game, the game ends. The moment you stop needing their approval, their disapproval becomes irrelevant. The moment you stop fearing their absence, their presence becomes optional rather than essential. This doesn't mean you become cold or uncaring. It means you become selective about where you invest your emotional energy. You love from a place of abundance rather than scarcity. Connect from a place of strength rather than weakness. You offer your presence as a gift rather than a desperate plea for reciprocation. And when you operate from this level of self-mastery, something beautiful happens. The right people are naturally drawn to you because they recognize the rare quality of someone who knows their own worth. And the wrong people either transform their behavior to match your standards, or they remove themselves from your life entirely. So, to the person who ignored you, who made you feel invisible, who taught you that your feelings didn't matter, know this: they gave you the greatest gift possible. They showed you that you don't need anyone's permission to be valuable. They demonstrated that your worth isn't determined by their recognition. They proved that you're strong enough to walk away from anyone who doesn't see your value. And most importantly, they created the space for you to discover that the most powerful response to being ignored isn't blocking or begging. It's becoming so focused on your own growth, so committed to your own well-being, so invested in your own happiness, that their absence becomes irrelevant. You don't need them to validate you because you've learned to validate yourself. You don't need them to choose you because you've learned to choose yourself. And you don't need them to see your worth because you've finally learned to see it for yourself. That's the Stoic way. That's the path of true strength, and that's how you transform rejection into the greatest victory of all, complete freedom from needing anyone else's approval to know that you are enough.